Today we discuss footprints without feet. This is class 10 English CBSE. Main characters of this story. First it is Griffin, next Mrs. Hall and Jaffers. So these are the main characters. Let's see who is Mr. Griffin. Character sketch. Griffin was an extraordinary and brilliant scientist. He discovered that the human body could become invisible and transparent as a sheet of glass. It was the result of his long and constant experimentation. However, he misused his discovery only for his personal gains, committing theft and burglaries and beating and robbing innocent persons. He could have earned fame and respect had he utilized his great discovery for the welfare of humanity. But his activities made him a lawless and an anarchist. His invisibility was possible only when he didn't wear any clothes. If dressed up, he could lose his invisibility. He had to remain without clothes even in the chilly weather of midwinter to remain invisible. He had to make illegal entries and burglaries in a clergyman's house, a big state store in London, and a shop in Drury Lane. So these are the places where he entered illegal way. This brought him to disrepute and dishonor instead of fame and respect. Second, Mrs. Hall, the landlord's wife at the local inn Iping. She was more than happy to receive a guest in the lean season. Mrs. Hall was convinced that her strange guest was an eccentric scientist. She excused his strange habits and irritable behavior because he had paid her in advance. When she noticed the strange behavior of her furniture in her guest room, she was convinced that the room was haunted by spirits. She dared to question even the eccentric scientist, Griffin. She also asked how he entered a locked room. Third, Jaffers. He is the village constable. He is a very determined person. He is called to the inn when the stranger unveils himself and creates chaos. He was quite surprised to find that he had to arrest a man without a head, but Jaffers couldn't be easily prevented from doing his duty. The constable tried to catch hold of a person whom he couldn't see at all. In the end, Jaffers made the last attempt to hold on to the unseen scientist, Griffin. Jaffers was knocked down unconscious. That's it. Now we discuss the summary. Footprints without feet. This is chapter 5 of the class 10 English supplementary reader. Footprints Without Feet is an interesting story written by Herbert George Wells. We say H.G. Wells. This story is about a brilliant scientist named Griffin who had developed a drug that could make a man invisible. He was successful in his experiment and developed a formula that had the power of invisibility. But by consuming the drug, a man could become transparent that couldn't be seen with the naked eye. Griffin carried out the experiment on himself, so he gulped the drug and his body became transparent like a sheet of glass. Inadvertently, he stepped in mud and the fresh muddy imprints of his feet were all over the place. It was first seen by two young boys. Who followed his footprints until they became fainter and disappeared altogether. Although Griffin was an outstanding scientist, he was a lawless man. Lawless, lawless man. His landlord disliked him and had asked him to eject the house. In vengeance, Griffin set the house on fire and soon wandered around the streets without food, money, and clothes. Owing to his invisibility, no one could see him, and as he was walking down the streets, he started feeling cold and entered a big London shopping center to warm himself. After the stores were shut down, he picked up some comfortable clothes to warm himself and fed himself with cold meat and some espresso from a nearby restaurant. Later, he slept on a pile of quilts in the store. The following morning, some associates started approaching him, and he removed all his clothes immediately and became invisible again. As Griffin wandered without clothes in the chilly weather, he could feel the biting cold and decided to take some clothes from a theatre company. Soon he found an appropriate shop and wore bandages around his forehead and a false nose, dark glasses, big bushy side whiskers, and a huge hat. Then he went to a shopkeeper's store and stole all his money. He realized that staying in a crowded city like London could be difficult for him, so he thought of moving to the Iping village. He had booked 2 rooms at the local inn in the village and reached there by boarding a train from London. It was a quiet and unusual experience for the villagers to expect an outsider with a strange appearance who had come to stay at the hotel during winter. Mrs. Hall, the wife of the landlord of the inn, tried to be friendly with him, but Griffin didn't want to talk to her. Soon enough, his money was exhausted and he started stealing to sustain himself. Due to his suspicious appearance, the inn owner and his wife attempted to check his room while he was away. Out of anger, Griffin damaged the furniture of the inn and threw it across the room towards them. The owner and his wife got scared, thinking that there were spirits around. Their unusual guest was responsible for all the chaos. Meanwhile, Mrs. Hall requested the town constable, Mr. Jaffers, to inquire about the identity of this peculiar individual and arrest him for damaging her furnishings. This annoyed Griffin further, and he decided to reveal his identity as he started unwrapping his bandages, whiskers, spectacles, and nose. Everyone was shocked to see this, as there was no normal human being hidden behind the bandages. The constable couldn't catch hold of Griffin as he took off all his garments, became invisible, and disappeared in thin air. Now, conclusion of the lesson. In the chapter, Footprints Without Feet describes the tendency of human nature to misuse creative discoveries meant for common good, but end up creating menace by misappropriating it. Here we pause. We continue in the next session.